It's the 9th of January 2019, and welcome to NFL Draft Talk on the SportsTalkLine network. I'm your host, Stephen Vanover, here with our Senior Draft Director, Connor Livesay. Good day, sir.
Good afternoon, Stephen. How you doing, man?
I'm doing real good, and I hope everyone out there is doing well. And before we get started, hey, on YouTube, reach down, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget that little notify bell on the different social media platforms. Please be sure and follow and retweet and repost what you're hearing here. Connor, man, it's been about a week, a little bit longer since we talked because you succumbed and went out to the Dallas game. Way to go. But there's a lot that's been happening since then, man. We got the national championship we want to talk about because there's a lot of players coming out. But before we do that, there's been some recent declarations, haven't there?
Yeah, there's been a lot of really talented players that have come out over since the last time we went on, and they've come out and announced that they're going to be declaring for the NFL draft. Some of those happened today on Wednesday. Some of them happened earlier in the week. You know, the big one was my QB1 so far, Dwayne Haskins, Ohio State quarterback. He announced he was going to be coming out only after starting a year at Ohio State, entering the draft. He'll likely be the first quarterback taken in the draft. But we also had, a few other guys. David Montgomery, the Iowa State running back. He's a talented running back out of Iowa State who's probably going to be in that top 3, 4, 5 mix for running backs taken. Calvin Ridley's brother, Riley Ridley, announced his declaration. He's going to be one of the top wide receivers taken. And we also had a few offensive linemen as well come out. Bobby Evans from University of Oklahoma, he did come out. He's very talented. And then a few Clemson players, Dexter Lawrence, who played the national championship. We're going to get into some of that a little bit later. But Dexter Lawrence and Trayvon Mullen, cornerback from Clemson, a few players announced on Wednesday that they were declaring as well. So it's been a jam-packed week for the NFL draft and declarations and Senior Bowl and everything else you could think of.
Oh, well, the GMs are just rubbing their hands in glee at all of these declarations because that gives them another shot at a talent that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So this is great news for this year's draft. But hey, you called it, the national championship game. And man, what a game it was, wasn't it?
Oh, it was incredible. And the bad thing is I watched the first 3 quarters at the airport, and then our flight left, so I had to get on the airport, get on the airplane, connect to Wi-Fi, get it all set up, and it wasn't perfect. I had some glitching here and there, but man, by the time I got that game up, I think it was 36-16 game, and it was just a blowout. And there was, I heard someone say it the other day is, how many Alabama games have you watched in the last 4 or 5 years where the fourth quarter starts and you just know the game's over and it's not them being on top? Like that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, basically I've seen games where you knew it was over, but it was always Alabama on top. Basically, exactly. An Alabama blowout. When you have those 2 words in the same sentence, you're talking about Alabama delivering the blowout, and this just blew my mind.
It definitely, and a lot of the players playing are young guys who are not going to be entering the NFL draft this year. But man, there was a ton of talent in that game that's going to be coming out in the 2019 draft that I'm sure we're going to dive into and talk about.
Well, hey, let's just touch about the thing that everybody really is talking about a lot right now, and that's that young freshman QB. Now, as you said, he's not coming out in this year's draft, but there's this, if you will, back and forth conversation that, he had an okay game, but it was really the wide receivers at Clemson. They were the ones that were the real stars. I don't see it that way. I thought he showed tremendous poise, and I thought he showed Brady-esque calmness in the face of adversity. What do you think?
No, I definitely agree. You look at the talented teams that Alabama has played this year. They played Oklahoma week before last with Kyler Murray, Marquise Brown, a bunch of talented players on that Oklahoma team, and you didn't see this domination come out of their offense. But with Trevor Lawrence, and again, I think the interesting thing there is the leading receiver for Clemson was Justin Ross, who is also a freshman. He's not a senior or a junior. He's a young kid that's also a freshman. And it was complete domination. He was 20 for 32, 347, 3 touchdowns, and that big one, not turning the football over.
Wow.
Is something that you can't do against Alabama, especially the caliber of defense and offense they had this year. And he just took care of the football, moved the chains, got the ball to the open man, and it was fun to watch, man. It was really fun to watch.
It's too bad he can't come out this year because the Browns would. Oh no, they actually wouldn't this year, would they? Okay, they got their guy. All right.
I do want to say before we move on, it's so interesting to look at the stats because he had thrown a pass to 9 different receivers.
Wow.
And like I said, Justin Ross led the team with 153 yards, but every other guy on the team only had T. Higgins had 3 receptions, and anyone else on Clemson only had at least 2 or 1 catches, or say at most 2 or 1 catches. So he was just spreading the ball around very well. And
so you can't focus. You can't really adjust and say, all right, we're going to put 2 guys on this guy. We're going to take this away from him. He's like, okay, fine. I'm not going back to that guy the rest of the game anyhow. It doesn't matter to me, okay? That's just an amazing performance against, like you said, a dominant defense, and not just any defense, the Bama D. I mean, they are known for what they do, which is dictate. And man, they could not dictate at all. It was dictated to them. Who were guys on the Clemson side of the ball that are going to be in this draft that you think made a plus in their statement?
You broke up a little bit. Did you say defense or offense?
Well, on either side, basically on the Clemson side, who actually came forth and made a difference? Who added a plus next to their NFL draft stock?
I'm going to start off with the guy who probably didn't do that with that game, but a guy who's done it throughout his career, and that's wide receiver Hunter Renfrow. You've probably seen him play at some point throughout his Clemson career. It seems like he's been with Clemson for I don't know how long, but he's been there for a long time. It seems he's a senior. I think he's going to be at the Senior Bowl coming up in a few weeks here, so I can't wait to see him. But he's a smaller slot receiver. He's not a guy that has a ton of yards, a ton of catches, a ton of touchdowns, but he just consistently gets it done. He moves the chains. He makes the big plays. He catches literally everything thrown his way. And I wanted to start with him because he's a guy who didn't really help himself, I'll say, with his performance at the national championship, but he's just a guy who I think is going to be good, just a solid slot receiver in the NFL for many years to come.
Well, it's a passing game in the NFL, so they need, as many receivers as they can get their hands on coming out. So who else do we have there?
Another guy I think that's interesting, and he's one that came out today on Wednesday and declared, is Trayvon Mullen. He had an interception, a sack, and 6 tackles. He's a bigger physical corner, makes plays on the ball, has good ball skills, good coverage skills. He's a guy who, again, I think not necessarily going to be an all-pro player, but he's going to come out, play at a high level. Another guy kind of on that same platform there is Clelin Ferrell. He's a guy who I don't think, again, is never going to be elite, but I could see him being a consistent 6 to 8 sack guy a year.
Wow.
There was word that he might come out last year, but he ended up going back to school. And he was actually looked at as a first-round pick last year by a lot of guys, but he ended up going back to school, having a good year. So, again, I see him kind of falling in the back end to early part of the second round. He's very talented.
One of those value guys that teams are going to get late, and if he hits the right scheme, man, it's going to click, right?
Yeah, we didn't even talk about Christian Wilkins, and he's a guy who's a defensive tackle who's going to be awesome. That's the only way to really put it. He's a guy who I think is going to be extremely good in the NFL. Not on the same tier as a guy like Aaron Donald or anything like that, but he's going to be a very, very solid interior defensive lineman. Dexter Lawrence as well. He's a guy who's going to be talented. He didn't play in the game due to some off-the-field issues. But Austin Bryant's the guy, another defensive lineman who I think kind of fits what you're talking about. He's a bigger defensive end. I think he's going to fit in those 4-3 defensive schemes as a base end. And I think he's a guy who, again, is not going to have huge sack numbers, but he's going to play well against the run. He's going to get you 3, 4, 5 sacks a year. And he's going to be a guy that you're not going to have to grab in the first 2 rounds. He's a 4th or 5th round pick, and I could see him having a lot of success in the NFL if he's in the right system.
Well, I mean, it all boils down to the passing game in the NFL right now. Ultimately, I mean, you want wide receivers, you want cornerbacks, and you want guys that can get to the quarterback. But ultimately, man, there's been a resurgence of the running game as well here recently with Ezekiel Elliott, Todd Gurley, some of these guys that are really changing how the running back is being viewed in the NFL. Do we have any guys like that are jumping out from this game?
Definitely, and we're going to go over to the Alabama side of the field for that one, and that's two guys, and one of them, just Damian Harris. He's a very talented running that should have probably come out last year, could have come out last year, but he decided to go back to school. He didn't get the ball nearly as much this year as he has in years past due to Tua being a very good passer. They haven't seen that in a while at Alabama. So, his workload kind of diminished, but he's still very effective. They have three very talented backs. It's still up in the air what the other two are going to do, but Joshua Jacobs, might be the most talented back there. He's a big back that runs, in between the tackles well, but has that speed and explosiveness that can run outside of the numbers and, make some plays as well outside of the tackles. And Najee Harris is another guy who, big back that, he's a bowling ball to bring down, and he's going to be very successful. Those guys still haven't made a decision yet on when they're coming out, so that'll be one to keep an eye on and see when they do announce that.
Well, the multi-purpose backs have been all the rage here the last few years, but I think Derrick Henry got a bunch of people excited with that, that big back approach, showing his power on those huge runs that he had for the Titans. These are the guys, when you're describing it, these are the type of runners I'm hearing about, yeah? Yeah,
Josh Jacobs he's 5'10", 215 is what he's listed at, but he just plays so big. He almost reminds me of what Maurice Jones-Drew used to run like, just because of how of a bowling ball he is. When he does get the ball, and he's very fun to watch because he's not just a short, every down player. But you talk about, what you talked about, the Brandon Jacobs, Najee Harris. He's 6'2", 230, and he's just built built in a machine, built in a lab.
Sticking on the Bama side of the ball, okay, and especially when you're looking at these value picks, if you will. I mean, if you hit on any pick, it's a value, right? But after the first three rounds, where you're talking 4th, 5th, and 6th round picks, Bama is known for their depth. I mean, this is an unusual result in this game, but out of this game, which players do you think are going to fall in that range there and have a chance to make a difference, though?
Yeah, a guy who I like that plays on the defensive side of the ball for Alabama is Isaiah Buggs. He's kind of the tweener that we talked about between the defensive tackle, defensive end. Very talented, though. He makes a lot of plays for that offense, for the defense for Alabama. And he's a guy who's going to be at the Senior Bowl as well. So I'm excited to see him up close and personal, see how he weighs in, see how he plays against some of that tougher competition. But he's got all the size you could ask for at 6'5", 286. He's very, very talented. He had 11 sacks in his 2 years at Alabama, 17.5 tackles for loss. Just a guy who's always around the ball, making plays behind and at the line of scrimmage. Just a very fun player that, like I said, he's probably a second, third, possibly at latest, I'd say 4th round type of guy, but a guy who I think someone's going to draft in those rounds and be very happy with.
Well, the Dallas Cowboys have really got a lot of people's notice this year using the heavy Marinelli rotation where, they're having 8 guys and they're all getting significant snaps as opposed to having your starting 3 or 4 guys and then that's it. They're going to get the majority. They're using that rotation, and the NFL is a copycat league. So these guys that you're talking about in these later rounds, do you see them as being good rotation guys that could step in and give 100% on, 20 snaps a game?
Yeah, that's kind of what I see coming from a guy like Isaiah Buggs. Maybe not a guy who's every play, playing 99% of the snaps, defensive end or defensive tackle, wherever NFL teams want to slot him in, but a guy who can come in, on passing downs or play as that base defensive end and, play well against the run, offer a little bit of a pass rush. It pains me that we're not even talking about the best player in this draft who played in the game. I'm sure we'll get to him in a second, but, it's both of these teams were loaded with so much NFL talent. I think, I heard it today on the radio that we're going to look back in 3 or 4 years and just realize how much talent was in that game. When we see Trevor Lawrence and Tua playing in the NFL along with Quinnen Williams, Deontay Thompson, you're going to look back one day and go, wow, we watched that game with this much talent in it, and all these guys are in the NFL now just making tons of money, making tons of plays.
Well, I really liked that game. I actually picked Clemson to win. I did not pick Clemson to dominate. Okay, I just thought that their defense was for real, and I thought that they could actually do something to stop the Bama offense. But I did not realize that what they could do on offense there with that QB. And hey, actually, we are running a little bit long here on time, so I was going to ask you to bring your last 2 players that you want to talk about for this game. And I know it's going to be a tough call because I'm going down the list here of players I want to talk about, and man, I've still got 7 on my list. What's your last 2 that you want to talk about?
All right, I took a really deep dive into Quinnen Williams today, and I came away. I posted it on my Twitter, which I hope you guys follow me on Twitter at Connor NFL Draft. He may be the best defensive player I've ever evaluated doing this. He is a freak. He reminds me a lot of Aaron Donald. And again,
wow.
I don't want to compare him to Aaron Donald because that just sounds ridiculous, but you watch those 2 guys play side by side, and you won't see much of a difference. He's just so technically refined. He plays with so much power, so much explosiveness. He eats up double teams. There was 2 sacks in the LSU game that I watched today where he was getting double teamed, and he had to swim move both the left guard and the left tackle on 2 separate plays, and he got the sack on both of those 2 plays. And it's just his pass rush moves are phenomenal. He's stout against the run. His only fault, and again, he's a young kid. He's a stud at his position. Is you'll see sometimes when the ball's not near him, he's not a guy who's running from the backside chasing plays down. But Lord have mercy, he makes plenty of plays when they are in front of him, when he is able to rush the passer. It's just he's so much fun to watch.
I can't stress enough how I really appreciate the way that you worded that at the beginning of the description. Like if I'm going to describe someone and I say, they remind me of, Lawrence Taylor, LT. I am not saying they are going to be the next Lawrence Taylor. I'm saying they have some attributes, be it physical, instinctual, the way they move, these types of things, that this is the closest player in my mind that I can go, ooh, he kind of is a little bit like this guy. You would do best to deploy him in this similar fashion. He would do best if played in a similar scheme as this player. That's what we're talking about. And I got to agree with you when you talk about Aaron Donald, because this guy, you come out of college, you normally have one pass rush move, and it's usually a bull rush, okay? This guy not only has pass rush moves, he plays the run well, he uses his hands well, he keeps his head in the game, he's totally aware. I mean, he really does remind me of Aaron Donald. And that's a burden, for a young man to carry perhaps, but it's meant as a compliment.
No, definitely. That's just watching the way he uses his arms and his hands, and it looks like Aaron Donald. You watch Aaron Donald get sacks. He uses that swim move and that rip move a ton to blow off the line of scrimmage and beat these offensive linemen. And Quinnen Williams does the same thing, and he rarely gets caught. He gets doubled a ton. He beats doubles a ton. It's just no real way of stopping him. He's just a dominant force in the middle of that defensive line.
Okay, off the top of your head, just looking at the draft, kind of swimming it, it's still early. What would be his dream matchup pick? Which team could he fall to or, end up at, however you want to word that, and say, wow, if this team could get this guy, this would be the perfect matchup?
I mean, I think he can be an all-pro anywhere. That's just the talent he is. Arizona picks first. I'd love to see him playing next to Chandler Jones on that defensive line. That would be absolutely unreal. Wherever he lands, he's going to be a Pro Bowler, all pro. And again, he's young. He has not declared for the draft yet. I'm hoping he does. I don't know why he wouldn't, due to the fact that he is slated to be a, lock top 5 pick
Right.
I don't know why he wouldn't come out, but you still have to wait for that because there's been people who have surprised us before. So we're waiting for that declaration. Hopefully it comes here soon because that's going to be a big name that enters the draft.
Oh yeah, and like you say, there's no financial reason for him to stay in. However, man, you just don't know. There things bigger than money. I know that's hard to believe for some people, but it's true. It really is. All right, your last person, the one that stood out from here, and you're saying, okay, I want to talk about this person from that game.
Yeah, a guy who didn't make a ton of play. Again, he's kind of almost on that same line as what I talked about with Hunter Renfrow. He actually didn't play all that well. But a guy who I'm going to hang my hat on no matter what is Deontay Thompson, Alabama's free safety. He's a guy who has range. He comes up and makes plays on the run. He has a little bit of off-the-field baggage, nothing too serious, but you don't see a lot of safeties coming out nowadays who have that Earl Thomas style of range.
Nope.
And again, that's another steep comparison, but just the range that they play with is very similar. And we see that with Deontay Thompson. He makes a ton of plays on the ball. Can play in coverage, can play in run support. He's just a lot of fun to watch. He can play up, he can play down, he can kind of do everything for Alabama, and I think that's going to translate very well to the next level. Some team's going to draft him probably, I'd say, in the mid-back end of the first. Maybe his off the field will push him to the second and be very happy with that player that they get just because of the attitude he brings and the style of player he is.
All right, and we just thought to nip this in the bud before Cowboys fans get too excited. The Cowboys do not have a first-round draft pick this year, okay? so they're probably not going to get a shot at this guy. But hey, it's Jerry Jones. You never know, right?
That's true.
All right, yeah, I was excited about him as well. I really love him. Let me ask this about it because I think people can relate to this because he just came out. There was a player last year that came out that I was super excited about at safety for the same reasons you talk about this guy, in that he had skills that you just aren't normally seeing a guy come out, Earl Thomas type, if you will. All right, and that's Derwin James for the Chargers. He's in the playoffs right now. That kid is just amazing. How do you compare these two side by side?
I think they're a little bit different. I think I like, Deontay Thompson's range a little bit more than I like Derwin James. I didn't necessarily pigeonhole James into the, strong safety mold, but I didn't necessarily see him as a bona fide free safety. I think he does so many things well as far as covering tight ends and coming up and, rushing the quarterback even. I don't necessarily see that with Deontay Thompson. I just think he is a true free safety. He's got, the size at 6'2", 200 pounds. He has the range. He has the ball skills. He really just has a total package. If you were building a free safety in a lab, you'd likely turn to a player and turn him into Deontay Thompson as a young college football player to hopefully play in the NFL at some time. But, they do match up very similar physically. Their measurables are very similar. Their ball skills are very similar. Their attitudes are very similar. They are similar in some ways, but I think that Thompson's range and ability to play as a true free is a little bit better than what I could say with James coming out last year.
I mean, that's just scary good when you're saying that you have more range than Derwin James. You can get all over the field like a Wolverine on acid. I mean, that guy's got some serious range. But I've seen Thompson play, and I go like, wow. I mean, geez.
Yeah.
I can't think of a team he wouldn't fit with.
No, definitely. And like I said, James is more of a playmaker. He's a guy who's going to, get you a stop on third down, sack the quarterback, knock that ball down, make a crazy play, range play to stop the, running back in open space. Where Thompson's a guy who's just going to, run what looks like 50 yards across the field on a ball that was thrown, with some anticipation and knock the ball away at the last minute. Not necessarily something that shows up, on the stat sheet or, shows up as a huge interception or huge stop, but he just makes so many plays with his range and coverage. It really is fun to watch.
All right. Well, hey, Connor, look, we're running late on time here. I want to take this moment to thank you so much for being here, man. It's always a pleasure to get caught up on the NFL draft from you.
Of course, man. We're having a blast over at SportsTalkLine
Yes.
covering this draft. We're about to ramp it up a little bit more as well with the football season coming to a close. The Senior Bowl's here in a few weeks. I'll be attending the Senior Bowl, so I can't wait to get back down to Mobile, check out some of these players, and see what they do against some of the toughest competition in the world with some of these NFL coaches coaching them. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait to get back down there and bring a lot of analysis with me and back to Sports Talk Line.
Yeah, that's really a great technical aspect down there when these guys actually get up, and some of them have never had coaching at this level. You know, they're from smaller school guys of this thing. Of this nature, and they get NFL coaches in their face, and you get to see, hey, man, that's their first big test right there, and it begins this long job interview process, right?
Definitely, that's the best way to describe it, as a job interview. You know, they show up, they have to do things a certain way. They have people all around the city, all around the hotels, all around the football field, watching everything those guys do. You just can't get caught slipping up at all. That'll be, you know, it doesn't take much to get you crossed out a team's radar or their draft sheet, draft board, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't take much. So, you know, it's a huge job interview. Really, it is.
All right, and hey, you got some awesome interviews last year. I'm sure we're going to have links to those below on most of the social media platforms. I know you're going to get some awesome interviews for us this year as well. For everyone listening out there, hey, the only way that we can get Connor out there every year to do this is for support from our listeners and from our viewership. We're going to put some links and add that where you can actually support and help send Connor out there. We have to compete against the big alphabet, CBS, ABC, et cetera, and we do it, and we are beholden to no one, all right? We don't have to answer to the players union, the agents, or anybody. We give you the real story from the ground up. And a guy like Connor Livesay, who goes out there on the ground, he watches all of his own film. This is not regurg anything. This is from a real guy who knows football, who goes out there and watches it. Connor NFL Draft on Twitter. Connor, thank you so much for being here, sir.
Of course, thank you. Can't wait to do it again next week.
You know it, and we'll be here every week, people, redoing the draft, breaking down the positions and the players. Until next time, we appreciate you being here, and listen like you play with intensity.